Our next guest is going to be making numerous appearances throughout the state of Idaho and nearby in the next 10 days or so. And he's speaking about a topic that I know that people who listen to talk radio are familiar with the topic of Agenda 21. And we were mentioning in the last half hour, it's funny when you talk to people in politics, though, oh, what's that? And I said they're either not listening to anyone and they're completely shut out of the public conversation, or they're pretending they don't know what it is. Tom DeWeese is the president of the American Policy Center. He's going to be speaking about Agenda 21 here in Twin Falls, as well as a number of other places around the state of Idaho, and as I said, nearby. First of all, Mr. DeWeese, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You'll be speaking Tuesday at the College of Southern Idaho, and that's an opportunity for folks on the local level, and I have some details here that there's an admission charge of $5, and I assume that helps pay your flight costs and the like. You're going to be a number of other places, too, though.
We are. Actually, on the 16th, I'm going to be in Boise. We're going to be at the Boise Civic Community Center. And then, of course, Twin Falls on the 17th. Then on the 18th, I'm going to be in Rexburg at, I like this, the Romance Theater. So, and then on the 19th, we're going to be at the Center Place in Spokane Valley. So it's going to be a busy week.
Well, Rexburg might be one of the most beautiful places in the Northwest as well, so Romance Theater probably makes great sense.
That works. Huh?
It does. I think you're going to find a very receptive audience, and you'll be speaking at the Herritt Center, we should point out, Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. But in fact, I think wherever you go, you find a receptive audience. But we were talking about what I mentioned in the first half hour of the program during the break here, that a lot of people in elective office, they claim they don't know what Agenda 21 is or what their constituents are talking about when the subject comes up. And they're being a little disingenuous, right?
Just a little, yeah. I mean, by this time, we've had thousands of activists across the country come into city councils, county commissions, and talk about this. And, one of the things that seems to be universal is as you get those 3 minutes to address them as they sit on high looking down at you, they do this eye roll, and then they have this sigh. Oh, you mentioned Agenda 21. And that's kind of universal. I think they take them into a class and teach them this. But, one of the things, first of all, when they first introduced Agenda 21 in 1992 at the Earth Summit, there were 50,000 delegates at this Earth Summit. And the word then was Agenda 21 was a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. And over again, Nancy Pelosi introduced a resolution into Congress calling it a comprehensive blueprint. The American Planning Association called it a comprehensive blueprint. They were very excited about this up until about the mid-2000s, when I and others began to bring this out and ask questions about it. All of a sudden, it became, what? You mean that innocuous 20-year-old document that doesn't have any enforcement capability? Big switch.
I have heard it described too. They will give it different names in different communities. It'll be called, our streetscape plan, or it'll be called Sacramento 2020, or Boise 2025, and they get around it that way by just changing the title of it.
They do, and if you look at them, I mean, 2030, 2040, 2050, you hear these numbers. As soon as you hear that, you know what it is. And quite frankly, you can go on the Internet and you can find Dubai 2050, Jamaica 2050, and you will find the exact same language. The one thing they all have in common is that none of them are local. But that's what they tell us over and over again. This is just a local plan. This isn't some international thing. But if you look behind the scenes, you will find hundreds of non-governmental organizations, many of which helped write Agenda 21 at the UN level. And then they went into the federal government, got these grant programs put together. The grants come with very strict strings attached that if you comply to those grants, you are implementing Agenda 21. And then they went into the state legislatures. They got the state legislatures to pass legislation that says communities have to implement some kind of comprehensive plan. Then they went into the communities and said, oh, don't worry about it. Got it all right here in a box for you, and we got the money for you, too. And that's how they brought it from the international level into your backyard.
Wanted to mention we've got a short break coming up. Tom DeWeese is joining us this morning, president of the American Policy Center, and we'll be talking with him until close to 9 o'clock this morning. Also, we'll take perhaps some of your telephone calls in the next segment as well at 208-736-0300. We're at 34 right now. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And Mr. DeWeese, for people who'd like to know more about your organization, is there a website you could send them to?
Absolutely. We're the American Policy Center, and the website is americanpolicy.org. And we've got all kinds of articles, about a 15-year archive of articles we've done on these issues. We've focused on creating tools to help local activists to fight back on these things. So you can find all that on the website.
We've got more coming up with Tom DeWeese in just a couple of minutes. We've got, we're going to call it 33. It's going to get a little warmer today. I should point out the day that he's going to be here next week. We're supposed to be in the 70s. So he's bringing us some good weather, too. 20 minutes now from 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our guest, Tom DeWeese, is joining us this morning, president of the American Policy Center. And just to reiterate, he's going to be speaking in Twin Falls Tuesday night at the Harrod Center at the College of Southern Idaho. That starts at 7 o'clock, $5 admission. And if you are not yet fully up to speed on Agenda 21 and what it means for you, this is an opportunity for you to get fully informed. We're at 8:41. We're at 34. Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we were just chatting with our guest about how this thing is oftentimes portrayed by different names. It's a matter of semantics. The names get changed to sort of deflect attention maybe from people in a particular community. But Mr. DeWeese, I was going to say, I think that a lot of people in government think they're doing the right thing by implementing this. There's a old line that we're going to do it for the public good. And whenever we hear someone talking about doing something for the public good, generally that means you're going to lose some liberty along the way.
Yeah. What you have here is an attack in implementing this. Sustainable development is the policy, and smart growth is one of the plans that you hear most often. And the ways they do that is, first of all, they attack private property rights. Under sustainable development, there can be no private property rights. That's called selfish and sometimes racist. Then one of the things they do is they begin to change your local government away from your representative government to a non-elected regional council. Sometimes this will be 15, 16 counties, all under the same control. And they fund it all by these federal grants, and this is how it's being put in place. Now, take your elected officials, your city councilmen, your county commissioners, and these people, for the most part, ran for office, because they wanted to help the community. They're not evil people, but the minute we elect them, we send them off to the National Association of County Commissioners or the National Conference of Mayors or these kind of things. And what they hear there are these same NGOs that wrote this speaking from the podium, and they give them sample legislation, everything else. They come home, same groups meet them there, said, hey, did you get the stuff? We got it all right here in a box for you. It's all good. They begin to believe this is all they hear. They begin to believe this is the proper role of government. And then somebody like me comes along and says, wait a minute on this, and the NGOs are whispering in her ear, don't pay any attention to him, he's a nutcase. And so they just go on believing this is the way it's supposed to be.
I met a couple who are from Ukraine, and they moved to the United States in the 1990s, and they were at an Agenda 21 presentation, and during the Q&A, they stood up and explained to everybody in the room that their experience living in an old cinder block high-rise was what Agenda 21 will deliver to people of the world, because the goal really is to move everyone into large concentrations population-wise. We'll have, quote, walkable cities, unquote, or you'll be riding the bicycle like they do in Portland, and that way you don't have to worry about road maintenance, and you can turn the interior of the country back to the forever wild dream that some of these people have, or a preserve for the wealthy. Their comments were a real eye-opener, because they said they had seen all of this whole show before under the old Soviet Union, and yet here we are. We appear to be ready, would you say, to make the same mistake?
I am so glad you brought that up because I want to share something with you. We hear in these, if you go to these planning missions, commissions and so forth, you will hear them talking about the chaotic growth of our cities, that we've got to control how they grow, and we're just trying to keep everything under control so we have good, healthy, happy cities. Let me share a quote with you. The chaotic growth of cities will be replaced by a dynamic system of urban settlement. The region is formed by the economic interdependence of its development from the industrial complex to the industrial region. The region has a single system of transportation, a centralized administration, and a united system of education and research. End quote. That quote was written by an architect named Alexei Gutenov in 1968 in a document called The Ideal Communist City. He was a Soviet Russian architect.
I have a note here from someone tuning in this morning, and she says, she's wondering, does the welcoming city term or neighborly city term, when they trot these things out, is this part of the 2021 or 2030 agenda?
Yeah. In 2015 they came up with the 2030 agenda, and a lot of people are saying, oh, well, they've replaced Agenda 21. No, they haven't. Agenda 21 is still the blueprint. Agenda 2030 is 17 goals. All they've done is gotten more specific in what they want to do, and it's all the same agenda. But they do this about every 10 years or so. They have a reboot, kind of keep their people involved, more excitement and more detailed goals. But it's all the same plan.
Mr. Deweese, we've got some callers looking to reach you. Do you have time to take a couple of telephone calls?
Sure. Yeah.
We're at 846. Tom Deweese is our guest. He is from the American Policy Center. He's the president of that organization. He's speaking next Tuesday at the Herritt Center in Twin Falls at the College of Southern Idaho on Agenda 21. And caller, you're on the air with Tom Deweese. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. I've thought to myself, well, if I won the Powerball, millions of dollars, I'd like to move out in the country, say like Gooding or Castleford or something like that. My question to you is, I know this sounds kind of too simplified, but does the United Nations pretty much own all of the water rights and aquifers in, say, Idaho?
They don't own it. They put policies together that would give them, if we completely complied with them, would give them control. The EPA, Barack Obama used the EPA as one of the major weapons in controlling water. And when they started calling everything from a mud puddle to being a wetlands and being a navigatable waterway, that fit right in with the UN's proposed Law of the Sea Treaty, which the United States has never ratified. That treaty would give the United Nations control of all the water, the oceans. And when the EPA and under Obama started talking about navigatable waterways that lead into the oceans being under the control as well, then that makes all the water under the control of this central power. It's not that they own it, but they would have very much say in how that is used. And you control the water, you control all of society.
It's coming up on 8:49, and the telephone number to reach our program is 208-736-0300. We have another caller with us. And caller, you're on Top Story with our guest, Tom Deweese. Go ahead.
Would like him to comment how the climate change, is that part of Agenda 21? The global warming hoax that's been perpetrated, is that part of Agenda 21? I'd like him to comment about that. Thank you.
Yeah, the global warming is their number one weapon. You will hear them say over and over again, well, it doesn't matter how many rights you think you have. If you don't have a planet to stand on, what good will they do you? So that's the argument they use. It's become the most effective weapon that everything that man does damages the environment, and so we have to control it. We have to stop it. Basically, if you really want to get to a diabolical thing here, we've always had megalomaniacs trying to take over the world. Usually that meant they had armies marching in and killing people and oppressing people. But what if you had a message that not only allowed you to take over the world without firing a shot, but got the people you're going to oppress to help you do it? What would be the most powerful message you could do with that? What they've chosen is the threat of environmental Armageddon. Again, with that excuse about having a planet to stand on, and they've got us all just throwing our liberties on the bonfire like a good old-fashioned book burning, helping them do it. It's diabolical to the farthest extent it could be.
We have another caller, I think, looking to get in touch with us. And caller, you're on the air with Tom DeWeese. Go ahead.
One thing I've found is most people don't have a clue when you ask them, do you know anything about Agenda 21 or 2030, and they look at you blankly. Sustainable development, they look at you blankly. So what's going on is very insidious. It's under the surface. But one thing I've learned is that to accomplish their goals, they have to substantially reduce the population of the world. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, I've heard some proponents of this advocate that the world can only support as many, just like 250 million people is one of the figures I've heard. They'll go up to as high as, they'll allow us 1 billion, This is a major part of this. If you look at all their plans on how they want us to be all herded into the cities and off the rural areas, the only thing that makes any sense when you're looking at all those plans is that we have a very vastly reduced population to fit into those plans. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And I keep saying to environmentalists who keep advocating this, okay, you get in line first, the rest of us will follow you to drink the Kool-Aid. Haven't had any of them take me up on that yet.
851, Tom DeWeese is our guest. He's the president of the American Policy Center. He's going to be speaking in Twin Falls Tuesday night. That's the 17th of October at 7 o'clock at the Herritt Center. That's on the College of Southern Idaho campus. And just wanted to mention there's a $5 admission as well. We have another caller looking to get in touch with Mr. DeWeese. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Yeah, back in the year 2000, the U.S. passed 3809 mining regulations, which wiped out every small miner in the United States on precious metals mining, and threw it to giant international corporations, only one really now hold the majority of claims in the western United States. Now, before Barack Obama left office, one of the last things he did, he passed under executive order perpetual bonding for mine cleanup, which means you have to bond a mine forever for future cleanup problems, which will consolidate mining down to less than 10 worldwide companies. Now, is that part of this Agenda 30?
I do believe. One of the things you'll notice here as these plans are implemented, these major international corporations are the ones that gain. Small businesses, free enterprise is wiped out. And I believe that the day will come when there are about 10 corporations internationally that control everything we eat, everything we produce, our homes that we live in a smart growth community. If you look out over the whole community, you'll find that the only private property that is owned is by the corporations that build the high-rise condos, and they're in partnership with the government. This is not free enterprise. It's not freedom. It's fascism, and this is a major tenet of it. And you see these major corporations that are the ones that are playing ball. You have bills going through a lot of state legislatures now called benefit corporations. These are the ones that have agreed to play ball with this. They get to go to the front of the line for all the goodies from government. And step by step, they're using government in this manner to put their competition out of business so they can get bigger and get stronger. And that's a major tenet of Agenda 21.
In 1986, I was working in one of my very first media jobs, and I was at my local county fair, and I ran into a woman who worked for an alternative weekly in the area. She was probably in her 70s at the time, probably not with us any longer, but she was telling me that one of the goals in these small rural counties, as I grew up in a small dairy farming community, was to actually remove the small farms, and we were seeing milk prices plummet and small farmers going out of business, and she said, you'll have a few major farms left, corporate farms, which means they won't have to spend all the money on road maintenance. They won't have to spend money on running, power lines out to homes of all of these small farms. And by golly, about a year after she told me that, the first big corporate farm with about 6,000 head of cattle opened up just not far from where I lived, a few miles away. And we saw more and more of that coming. And what she predicted, the hollowing out of a lot of these rural counties in northern Appalachia, has just gone on unabated. What was she seeing in 1986? I mean, that was proto Agenda 21, right?
Yeah, these things have been around for a while, and they just, as you said before, they just keep changing the name or changing the tactics, but the goal has been the same. And one of the things you'll see with small farmers, they talk a great line about buy fresh, buy local, protect the small farmer, and so forth, but their practices are exactly the opposite. One of the major tools that they use are conservation easements. They get the farmer, the farmer's worried. I've never met a farmer in my life that wanted to go out of business and not be a farmer. And so, they worry about, of course, the use of eminent domain taking their farm, which is government doing that. And so they get them to sign conservation easements and sell their development rights so that they are promised that they can stay a farm. And people, oh, yeah, I'll do that. Well, what they begin to do then is these land trusts that hold these conservation easements over them begin to squeeze the farmer, dictating what kind of crops they can grow and how they can grow them. And so pretty soon they're out of business. And the corporate farms are the ones that grow. And yet this land is locked away from development, but they're not farms anymore.
We've only got a couple of minutes to go, Mr. Deweese, but quickly, for people listening this morning, we're up against the United Nations and some very big, powerful public interests or special interests. How do average people go about standing up to this?
Well, when I talk about, when I speak, is, it's so vast, it's so huge, people have a hard time wrapping their heads around it because it affects every aspect of our lives. But the fact of the matter is, sustainable development, which is the policy of Agenda 21, cannot be implemented without damaging or destroying private property rights. If you can just take that one issue and focus on it and go to your county commissions, your city councils, and demand it. The trouble with our side is that we go in and we make a protest, we go home and say, well, nothing happened. But the other side stays there constantly. They're always there, and they wait for us to go home and keep going. We have got to create protests. We've got to work on getting rid of city councilmen and county commissioners that allow these NGOs to have this kind of power and put this stuff in place. We've got to be determined and do that, but we can do it on the local level. If we can preserve private property rights on the local level, we can preserve freedom as a nation. I fully believe that, and that's what I advocate.
I have a friend who likes to tell me there are a lot more of us than there are of them.
But we're all at home. So we've got to stop doing that if we want to preserve our freedom.
Well, I thank you much. We look forward to your visit coming up on Tuesday night here in Twin Falls.
I'll see you then.
And again, quickly, the website.
AmericanPolicy.org.
Tom Deweese, thank you much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
It's 8:57, coming up on 8:58. Want to thank Tom Deweese, president of the American Policy Center, for taking a few minutes with us this morning. Give us a preview of his address, and he'll be doing some Q&A too on Tuesday night. Once more, if you're not aware of this, he's going to be speaking. That's the 17th, October 17th. That's Tuesday night at the Herritt Center, and that will be at the College of Southern Idaho campus. He starts at 7 o'clock that night. Admission, $5. And if you'd like to learn more about this, as he pointed out, he's doing this in Boise, he's doing it in Rexburg, and in Spokane as well during his swing through the area next week. But get informed, because the future is now, as an old saying used to say. Yeah, that's a little redundant. But anyway, get informed, because you're going to need to know these things if you'd like to preserve our way of life. If you have any chance of doing that for your children and your grandchildren. It's 36. We've got discussion, in fact, the next hour, similar type of topics, talking about firearms and efforts, by the way, of course, always from Legion to try and control your right to bear arms. That's on the way following the news at 9 o'clock from Fox.